My name is Elise Westbrook. I am 29 years old, and the night my parents threw me out, the snow was falling so hard I could barely see the porch lights through the windshield. I had just come home after finishing a late architectural rendering project, still holding my laptop bag in one hand and my frozen car keys in the other, when I stepped into the living room and felt every pair of eyes turn against me. My older sister was sitting on the couch, crying into her hands like her entire world had collapsed. My father stood in front of me with his jaw clenched, his face red with anger, and before I could even ask what happened, he pointed at the door and shouted, "How could you do that to your own sister?" I froze. I had no idea what he meant. My mother looked at me like I was a stranger who had broken into her home. "Nothing you say matters now," she said coldly. My sister lifted her head just long enough to whisper that I had destroyed her marriage, that I had introduced her to someone, helped her hide it, and ruined her life out of jealousy. I tried to speak, but my father grabbed my coat from the chair and threw it into my chest. Then he stormed down the hall, ripped open my bedroom door, and started dragging my things out like they were garbage. Clothes hit the porch. My hard drive bounced across the frozen steps. My laptop bag landed in the snow with a sound I will never forget. I begged them to listen, but my mother locked the door while I was still standing outside with one bag, shaking in the storm. 6 months later, an anonymous email arrived after midnight. I opened the attachment, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Before I tell you what that email revealed and why my sister had chosen me as the perfect scapegoat, tell me where you are watching from tonight and what the weather is like there. I just want to know how far this story can travel. I spent that first night in the parking lot of a 24-hour grocery store with the heater running in short, desperate bursts because I was terrified my old sedan would run out of gas before sunrise. Snow kept piling against the tires, and every time a plow truck scraped through the lot, I woke up gripping the steering wheel like someone was trying to drag me back into that living room. My phone was almost dead, my clothes were damp, and my laptop bag sat on the passenger seat with snow melted into the seams. At 6:18 in the morning, I called the only person I trusted, my best friend, Valerie Brooks. She had just finished a night shift at the hospital, but the second she heard my voice, she said, "Send me your location." When I got to her apartment, she did not ask me to prove anything. She opened the door in sweatpants, took one look at my shaking hands, and pulled me inside. I slept on her couch for 5 days. During that time, I tried to call my father, Russell Westbrook, at least 20 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. I called my mother, Patricia Westbrook, and got the same cold silence. I texted my sister, Bianca Westbrook, asking what she had told them, begging her to stop lying, but her only reply was, "You know exactly what you did." Then she blocked me. On the third day, I borrowed Valerie's car and drove back to the house because I still believed that if I could look my parents in the eye, they would remember I was their daughter. My mother opened the door just wide enough for me to see the chain lock. She was fully dressed, calm and colder than the snow still packed along the walkway. I said, "Mom, please, just give me 5 minutes." She did not even blink. "Your father said you would try this," she said. "Leave now, Elise, or I am calling the police." I told her Bianca was lying, that I had never introduced her to anyone, that I had never helped her hide anything. My mother's face tightened with disgust. "Your sister's marriage is falling apart, and you still only care about yourself." Then she told me Aunt Denise had already informed the family, and nobody wanted to hear from me. The door closed before I could take another breath. By that afternoon, my phone started buzzing with messages from cousins I had not spoken to in years. Some called me jealous. Some called me disturbed. One said Bianca had always been too successful for me to handle. The worst message came from a college friend who told me she could not believe I would help destroy my own sister's marriage. I typed back, "You know me. I did not do this." The message failed to deliver. She had blocked me too. That was when I finally understood what Bianca had done. She had not just accused me in one emotional moment. She had built a story, fed it to the people who already saw me as the less impressive daughter, and watched them turn on me one by one. I sat on Valerie's couch that night with a blanket around my shoulders and realized that begging would not save me. People who wanted the truth asked questions. My family had asked none. They had chosen the version of the story that made Bianca the victim and me the monster. So I stopped calling. I stopped explaining. I stopped waiting for the front door of my childhood home to open. I had no family, no reputation, almost no money, and a damaged laptop that held the last pieces of my career. But somewhere under all that fear, something hard and quiet began to form inside me. If they were going to erase me, I would rebuild myself where they could not reach. Valerie told me I could stay as long as I needed, but after 1 week, I could see how exhausted she was. She worked 12-hour shifts, came home to find me awake at her kitchen table every morning, and kept pretending that having a half-frozen disaster of a best friend on her couch was no trouble at all. I loved her too much to take advantage of that kindness. I found the cheapest studio apartment I could afford on the edge of St. Paul, in a brick building with old pipes, thin walls, and a radiator that hissed like it was angry to be alive. The landlord wanted first month, last month, and a security deposit. I handed over almost everything I had saved. When I unlocked the door for the first time, the room smelled like dust, cold metal, and old carpet. But it was mine. No one could throw me out of it for a lie. I put my one bag of clothes in the closet, set my damaged laptop on a folding table Valerie gave me, and started working like survival was a deadline. Before everything fell apart, I had been building a career as an architectural visualization specialist. I created 3D renderings for real estate developers, interior designers, and small architecture firms. It was not glamorous to most people, but to me, it was freedom. I could turn an empty floor plan into a warm kitchen, a luxury lobby, a sunlit bedroom, a place someone could imagine living in. The problem was that my best files had been on the hard drive my father threw into the snow. Some were corrupted, some were gone forever. I spent days recovering what I could, rebuilding my portfolio from old cloud backups and screenshots I had sent to clients. I worked from a borrowed monitor, a cracked laptop screen, and a desk that wobbled every time I typed too fast. I woke up at 5:30 every morning, made coffee so cheap it tasted burnt before it touched the mug, and sent proposals until my fingers hurt. I took jobs I would have ignored before. I rendered basement remodels for contractors who paid late. I edited listing photos for realtors who called me sweetheart. I created kitchen mock-ups for a cabinet company that changed its mind 12 times and still complained about the invoice. But every small payment kept the lights on. Every completed project reminded me that my hands still knew how to build something beautiful. My parents did not call. Bianca did not call. Not one relative who had believed the worst about me ever reached out to ask if I had a place to sleep. At first, that silence crushed me. Then, slowly, it became useful. Silence gave me time. Time gave me focus. Focus gave me money. 2 months after the snowstorm, I received a message from Melanie Archer, the owner of a boutique design studio called Archer Lane Concepts. She had seen one of my renderings online and needed someone fast for a high-end townhouse development in Minneapolis. The deadline was brutal. The client wanted 6 full interior scenes, 2 exterior dusk shots, and a presentation board in 5 days. I said yes before fear could talk me out of it. For 5 days, I barely slept. I lived on frozen meals, black coffee, and pure stubbornness. I adjusted lighting until sunrise, rebuilt textures, fixed shadows, and delivered the final files 6 hours early. The next morning, Melanie called me personally. Her voice was calm, direct, and nothing like the chaos I had been living in. "Elise, this is excellent work," she said. "I do not know what your current situation is, but I want to offer you steady contract work. If this goes well, we can discuss a full-time role." I had to sit down on the floor because my knees went weak. For the first time since my father threw my belongings into the snow, I felt the ground come back under me. I was still hurt. I was still angry. I still woke up some nights hearing my mother say nothing I said mattered. But now there was a paycheck coming. There was a door with my name on the lease. There was a future my family had no power to cancel. The only thing I still could not let go of was the accusation itself. Who was this man Bianca claimed I introduced her to? Why would she need me to be the villain so badly? I thought those questions would haunt me forever. Then a name came through a mutual acquaintance, and the first thread of Bianca's story began to unravel. The name was Elliot Ramsey. I heard it from a former coworker who had not completely cut me off, but still spoke to me like standing too close might damage her reputation. She said Bianca had told everyone I introduced her to Elliot at a hospital fundraiser and encouraged them to keep talking even after I knew things were becoming inappropriate. According to Bianca, Elliot was charming, dangerous, and exactly the kind of man I would use to sabotage my own sister because I had always been jealous of her perfect life. The story was ridiculous, but that was what made it terrifying. It had just enough detail to sound believable to people who wanted to believe it. I searched Elliot online and found out he was an event coordinator who handled charity galas and corporate fundraisers around Minneapolis. I stared at his profile picture for 10 minutes, trying to remember if I had ever even spoken to him. I had attended one fundraiser the previous year because a client invited me. Bianca had been there too, dressed like she was walking into a magazine cover, laughing loudly with donors, making sure everyone knew she had married Trevor Landry, a polished insurance fraud analyst with a reputation for being sharp, quiet, and hard to fool. I remembered seeing Elliot near the check-in table. That was it. That tiny overlap had become the foundation of my destruction. I sent him an email with my real name, a careful explanation, and a request to meet. I expected him to ignore me. Instead, he replied within an hour. I was wondering when someone would ask me what actually happened. We met at a small coffee shop on a gray Saturday afternoon. Elliot arrived wearing a navy coat and an expression that said he had already lost patience with this entire disaster. Before I even finished my first sentence, he said, "I did not have an affair with your sister." His voice was flat, almost tired. "I barely know Bianca Westbrook." I showed him one of the messages someone had forwarded me, the version of the rumor that included his name. His jaw tightened. He told me he had worked 3 events where Bianca was present, and at the fundraiser in question, their conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. He remembered her because she kept complaining that the seating chart did not place her close enough to the hospital board members. Then he opened his laptop and showed me his calendar. On the weekend, Bianca claimed they had gone away together. Elliot had been in Denver managing a convention. He had flight confirmations, hotel receipts, client emails, even photos posted by the venue. "Your sister used my name because I was convenient," he said, close enough to sound possible, far enough away that your family would not check. Hearing that sentence made my stomach turn. Bianca had not made a panicked mistake. She had chosen a real person, built a lie around him, and placed me in the middle because she knew our parents would believe her pain before they believed my confusion. I asked Elliot if he knew anyone Bianca might actually have been involved with. He leaned back, thinking. Then he mentioned a name I had never heard before. Preston Hale. Preston was a vendor representative for a medical equipment company that worked with Bianca's office. Elliot had seen them together after 2 events, once by the service entrance and once at a hotel bar after a charity dinner. He said he did not think much of it at the time, but looking back, Bianca had seemed nervous when people noticed them. I wrote the name down on a napkin with a hand that would not stop shaking. Preston Hale. That was the first time the real shape of the lie appeared in front of me. Bianca had not accused me because she was heartbroken. She had accused me because she needed smoke. She needed noise. She needed my parents screaming at me so nobody would ask where she had actually been, who she had actually been with, and what she had done to her marriage. When I left the coffee shop, the winter air cut through my coat, but I barely felt it. I had confirmation that Elliot was innocent. I had a new name. I had a theory that made too much sense. What I did not have was proof. And without proof, my family would keep calling me a liar. My sister would keep wearing her victimhood like a crown. So I saved the napkin with Preston's name in my desk drawer, went back to work, and told myself the truth would surface someday. I just had no idea it would arrive 6 months after the storm, hidden inside an anonymous email that would change everything. By the time that email came, my life looked almost normal from the outside. I had steady work with Archer Lane Concepts, a better laptop, and enough money in my account that I no longer checked my balance before buying groceries. My studio still had terrible heat, and my upstairs neighbor still walked like he was moving furniture at midnight, but I had made it into a home. I had a small desk by the window, a thrift store lamp, a framed print Valerie bought me, and a rule that I would not check social media after dinner because every family photo felt like pressure on an old bruise. It was a Thursday night when my phone lit up at 12:43 a.m. I was finishing a rendering of a lake house kitchen when the notification appeared. The sender was a random string of letters and numbers. The subject line said, "You were never the reason." My hands went cold before I even opened it. The message was only 4 lines. "Do not reply to this account. Download the file before she finds the last copy. I should have spoken sooner. I am sorry." There was a PDF attached. For a few seconds, I just stared at it. My first thought was that Bianca had found a new way to hurt me. My second thought was that someone else knew. I downloaded the file. The first page loaded slowly, white light filling my dark room, and the moment I read the header, I stopped breathing. It was a screenshot of an email chain between Bianca Westbrook and Preston Hale. Not Elliot Ramsey. Preston Hale. The messages discussed hotel check-ins, fake vendor meetings, and the exact phrases Bianca used in her work calendar to make personal trips look like client visits. I scrolled faster. Page after page showed text messages between Bianca and Preston, intimate, arrogant, careless messages written by someone who never imagined they would be read by the sister she destroyed. Then I saw the exchange that made my blood run cold. It was dated 2 days before the night my parents kicked me out. Preston had written, "Trevor is asking too many questions. If he finds the hotel charges, this gets ugly." Bianca replied, "Let it get ugly. I already know how to handle it." Preston asked, "How?" Bianca answered, "I'll say Elliot was the mistake and Elise pushed it. Mom and Dad already think Elise resents me. They will believe she set me up before they believe I lied." I read that sentence again and again until the words seemed burned into the screen. Bianca had not just used me. She had studied the weakest place in our family and pressed on it with both hands. She knew my parents saw her as the successful daughter, the polished daughter, the daughter with the big house, and the perfect marriage. She knew I was the one they could doubt without feeling guilty. The PDF kept going. There were credit card statements showing hotel stays, jewelry purchases, expensive dinners, and flights booked under the excuse of vendor negotiations. There were receipts Bianca had tried to delete. There was a bill of sale for the SUV she and Trevor owned together. She had sold it quietly through a private buyer and told Trevor it was at a repair shop. Then there were screenshots of messages Bianca sent to my parents after I was gone. She told Russell and Patricia that Trevor had frozen her access to money because of what Elise caused. She said she needed emergency funds for legal help, therapy, and basic expenses. My parents wired her $35,000 from their retirement savings. Bianca used part of it to pay down a credit card full of hotel charges and another part to keep Preston comfortable while she figured out the divorce. I leaned back from the screen, shaking with a rage so cold it almost felt calm. My father had thrown me into a snowstorm for a lie. My mother had locked the door in my face for a lie. My family had erased me for a lie. And Bianca had turned that lie into cash. At the bottom of the PDF was a final note. I found her second phone in a box of winter clothes she left in the basement. My lawyer has copies of everything. I waited because I needed the evidence preserved correctly. You deserve to know. Meet me tomorrow at Northline Diner at 9 a.m. Trevor. I sat there until the screen dimmed. I did not cry. I printed the entire PDF before sunrise. Every page slid out of the printer like a weapon being loaded. By 8:30, I was dressed in the best blazer I owned, the folder under my arm, my hands steady for the first time in months. I was not going to beg anyone to believe me anymore. I was bringing the truth to the table and letting it speak for itself. Trevor Landry was already sitting in the back booth when I walked into Northline Diner. He looked different from the man I remembered beside Bianca at family gatherings. Back then, he was always composed, polite, almost too controlled, the kind of person who noticed everything and reacted to nothing. That morning, his eyes were tired, his face was unshaven, and a thick manila folder sat beside his coffee. He stood when he saw me, but neither of us reached for a handshake. Some moments are too heavy for manners. I am sorry, he said before I even sat down. I told him I did not need sympathy. I needed the truth. He nodded and pushed the folder toward me. Inside were printed copies of everything from the PDF, plus bank records, attorney notes, and a timeline. Trevor explained that he had suspected Bianca for months, but she was careful. She used work trips, burner apps, and a second phone. When he found the phone, he took it straight to his lawyer. His lawyer told him not to confront anyone until the evidence was duplicated and legally documented. That was why he waited. If Bianca found out too soon, she would delete everything and twist the story again. She used you because she knew they would not ask questions, Trevor said quietly. That is the part I cannot get past. I looked down at the text where Bianca called me the easiest person to blame and felt something inside me lock into place. Trevor told me Bianca was staying with my parents that weekend. She had told them she was too emotionally fragile to be alone. According to a mutual friend, my parents had been cooking for her, paying her bills, and telling everyone Trevor was cruel for leaving. I asked if they were home now. Trevor checked his watch and said they always had Sunday breakfast at 10. I closed the folder. Then we are going to breakfast. We drove separately. When I pulled up in front of my parents' house, the same house where my laptop had landed in the snow, I felt no urge to run. The lawn was clean, the porch light was on, and through the window I could see movement in the dining room. I walked up the steps with Trevor beside me. I knocked once, not because I needed permission, but because I wanted them to hear the sound before the truth entered the room. My father opened the door. For 1 second, he just stared at me. Then his face hardened. You are not welcome here. I held up the folder. Call the police if you want. I brought evidence. Trevor stepped into view behind me, and the anger on my father's face flickered into confusion. My mother appeared behind him, her hand pressed to her chest like the sight of me was an insult. Then Bianca walked into the hallway wearing one of my mother's sweaters, her hair pulled back, her expression already arranging itself into wounded disbelief. Why is she here? Bianca whispered. Trevor answered before I could, because I found the phone. Every bit of color left her face. We walked into the dining room and I placed the folder on the table. My father started to shout, but I opened the first page and slid it toward him. "Read it." He refused at first. My mother said this was cruel, that Bianca had suffered enough, that I should be ashamed for attacking my sister. So I read the line out loud. "Mom and Dad already think Elise resents me. They will believe she set me up before they believe I lied." The room went silent. My father grabbed the page. His eyes moved across the text, and for the first time in my life, I watched certainty drain out of him. My mother leaned over his shoulder. Bianca said it was fake. Trevor dropped a second stack of papers onto the table. "My attorney has the digital copies. The metadata is preserved. Try again." Bianca's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I laid out the evidence piece by piece. The hotel receipts, the emails with Preston Hale, the fake calendar entries, the SUV sale, the credit card statements, the wire transfer from my parents, the messages where Bianca planned to blame Elliot Ramsey and attach my name to the lie because she knew no one in that house respected me enough to ask for proof. My father's hands began to tremble. My mother sat down slowly like her legs had stopped working. Bianca tried to cry, but this time her tears came too late. "I was scared," she said. "Trevor was going to ruin me. I made one mistake." Trevor laughed once, without humor. One mistake does not require a second phone and a financial cover-up. My father turned on her with the same voice he had used on me in the storm. "You let me throw your sister out of this house." Bianca reached for him. "Dad, please." He stepped back like her touch burned. My mother finally whispered, "Did you take the money?" Bianca looked at the floor. That was answer enough. My father stood up so fast the chair scraped against the hardwood. "Get out." Bianca stared at him in disbelief. "What?" "Get your things and get out of my house." The words landed hard because everyone in that room remembered where we had heard them before. Bianca started sobbing for real then, begging my mother to say something. But Patricia Westbrook, the woman who had locked the door on me, sat frozen with both hands over her mouth. 10 minutes later, Bianca stood on the front steps with 2 suitcases and a designer tote, crying so hard she could barely breathe. There was no dramatic snowstorm this time, just dirty piles of old ice along the walkway and a bright, cold sky above her. She looked at me like I was supposed to save her. "Elise," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, tell them this is too much." I looked at my sister, the woman who had watched me lose my home, my family, and my name without blinking. I felt no joy, but I felt no guilt either. "Now you know what it feels like," I said, "when no one lets you explain." Then I walked to my car. Behind me, my father called my name, but I did not turn around. He had wanted the truth. Now he could live in the house it destroyed. The fallout did not happen all at once. It happened in waves, each one taking something else from Bianca until the life she had used to look down on me was unrecognizable. Trevor's divorce attorney used the evidence from the second phone to challenge almost every story Bianca had told. Because she had hidden spending, sold the SUV without honest disclosure, and used marital funds for hotel rooms, gifts, and trips with Preston Hale, she lost most of her leverage in the settlement. Trevor kept the house. Bianca was ordered to repay part of the money she had drained, and the legal fees nearly buried her. The humiliation got worse when her company opened an internal investigation. Bianca tried to frame the affair as a private matter, but private matters do not usually involve work email, vendor contracts, fake business travel, and expense reports that list romantic dinners as client meetings. Preston Hale protected himself immediately. He denied anything that made him look responsible, handed over his own emails, and cut Bianca off the moment she became a liability. The man she destroyed her family to keep vanished the second consequences appeared. Bianca was fired without severance. Her company did not want scandal attached to vendor fraud, and a woman who had built her reputation on being polished, connected, and untouchable was escorted out carrying a cardboard box. Word traveled fast. The relatives who had called me jealous suddenly became quiet. Some tried to message me with awkward lines like, "We did not know the whole story." I did not answer. People who join a public execution do not get private access to the person who survived it. My parents lost $35,000 and far more than that in pride. For a few months, I heard nothing from them. Then the letters started. The first one came in a cream envelope with my father's handwriting across the front. I recognized it immediately and felt the old fear rise in my throat before I reminded myself that paper could not open my door. I sat at my kitchen table, opened it, and read the words slowly. Mistakes were made. We were misled. Your mother and I are getting older. Family should not stay broken. We need to discuss the future and the estate. Not once did the letter say, "We were wrong to throw you into a snowstorm." Not once did it say, "We should have listened." Not once did it say, "We are sorry for choosing Bianca's lie over your voice." They wanted forgiveness without accountability. They wanted access to me without naming what they had done. They wanted me to come back, not because they had changed, but because their golden child had become too expensive to keep worshiping. I tore the letter in half, then in half again, and dropped it into the trash. After that, I blocked my parents, Bianca, and every relative who had helped spread the lie. The silence that followed was not lonely. It was clean. It was the sound of my life no longer being negotiated by people who only valued me when they needed someone to blame. 3 years have passed since that night in the snow. I no longer live in that freezing studio with the angry radiator. With Melanie Archer's support, I became a senior visualization lead at Archer Lane Concepts, and later I started a small side studio with Valerie, creating renderings and design presentations for independent builders and real estate teams across Minnesota. I bought a small townhouse in St. Paul with warm lights, a deep blue front door, and a spare room Valerie jokingly calls the emergency couch, even though she is the reason I once had a safe place to sleep. My home is peaceful. It smells like coffee in the morning and roasted garlic on Sunday nights. No one screams in my living room. No one uses love as a weapon. No one is allowed to enter unless they respect the life I fought to build. I still hear updates sometimes. Bianca moved into a small apartment outside the city after my parents refused to keep paying her bills. She bounced between jobs, blaming Trevor, blaming Preston, blaming the company, blaming me. I do not know if she ever blamed herself. My parents still live in that big, quiet house, the one they once threw me out of to protect a lie. They tell people the family fell apart because I refused to forgive. Let them. Their version of the story no longer has a key to my life. I used to think family meant enduring anything as long as the people hurting you shared your blood. I thought being a good daughter meant staying soft while everyone else stayed cruel. But the truth is, some people are committed to misunderstanding you because your pain protects their favorite illusion. In my family, Bianca was the golden child, and I was the convenient shadow. When her perfect image cracked, they needed someone to carry the blame, and I was the easiest person to sacrifice. That does not mean I was weak. It means I was surrounded by people who found my silence useful. The most valuable lesson I learned is this: love without respect is not family. Forgiveness without accountability is not healing. And a boundary is not revenge. A boundary is the door you build when people keep proving they cannot be trusted with access to your heart. You do not have to accept emotional abuse because someone gave birth to you, grew up with you, or shares your last name. You do not have to sit at a table where your pain is treated like an inconvenience. Sometimes walking away is not cruelty. Sometimes walking away is the first honest act of self-respect you have ever allowed yourself. I did not win because Bianca lost her marriage, her job, or her reputation. I won because I stopped letting her lies define me. I won because I built a life where truth matters more than appearances. I won because the storm that was supposed to destroy me became the weather that pushed me out of a house I never truly belonged in. If you are listening to this and you have ever been blamed for things you did not do, if you have ever been treated like the family scapegoat, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not responsible for protecting a toxic family from the truth. You are not selfish for choosing peace. You are not cruel for refusing to return to people who broke you and then called your healing disrespect. The people who love you in a healthy way will not need a disaster to believe your voice. They will ask questions. They will listen. They will care about your side before they decide your guilt. And if your own family cannot do that, you are allowed to build a new one with people who can. So tell me, if you were in my place, would you forgive parents who threw you out in a snowstorm without letting you explain? Or would you close that door forever and protect the peace you built from the wreckage? If this story reached something inside you, comment the word peace, because no one should have to lose themselves just to keep a broken family comfortable.
Our team carefully curates a script with the hope of delivering both emotional storytelling and valuable lessons. Everything in this video is fictional and written only for educational and entertainment purposes. We hope it reminds viewers that sometimes closure does not come from an apology, but from finally choosing peace.